morning. In a couple of videos, we've talked about hex features. I think one of the last videos was responding to a question when someone asked about a system about when you're populating your hexes with features. Found the system. I forget the name of the book it came from, the supplement, but it was 1d6 of this, 1d6 of that, 1d6 for layers, 1d6 for features, something like that. And then it created a little bit of a discussion in the comments in terms of exactly what is a feature in the sense of populating hexes. I was thinking about what I was going to call this video, and I came up with all these names that were really just too wordy. But ultimately, I think what we're looking at is determining what I would call a major or hex feature, and then minor, or call it a sub-hex feature. Maybe major and minor. I don't think I love those words too much. Maybe I call it a hex feature and a sub-hex feature. Now, what a thing is in the world, whether it's something that we would call a hex feature or a sub-hex feature, it's somewhat up to you. But what I like to think about it is if we're talking about the hex feature, and when we're looking at populating our 6-mile hexes, the kinds of features that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about, well, what do I want to mark down right now on the map? Those are those hex features. These are the kind of one interesting thing, or what is it could be an important thing. It could be an intriguing thing. It is the thing that if I was flying over the area in a hot air balloon and I looked down and I saw that, I would say, ooh, make a note of that. That's what's on that big map. Now, what that is exactly can depend on just your personal feelings. It can also depend on the context of the terrain. So, for example, I wouldn't put watering holes as a feature to populate. To me, a watering hole is something that at best would be a sub-hex feature, but there's a context there. If we were in the desert and that was an oasis and it was something rare, then because of that context of being in the desert, suddenly that oasis watering hole would, I think, be elevated to a hex feature. Whereas a watering hole in a forest in which there's tons of those things, for me anyway, would regulate it to a sub-hex feature. When I think about a sub-hex feature, I think it can be more difficult to define than a hex feature. It's easy to say, well, this is the interesting thing that's around here. This is the thing that if you were in this 30 some odd square miles of terrain would be the thing that you might pick your eye on, whether it's a ruined village or even just a ruined house or a pond or a lake or a rock fall or a chasm or something else. But when you look at what a sub-hex feature, well, you know, kind of what does that mean? Because it can be in many ways the same kind of thing, either not on as big a level. You go from a chasm to kind of a hole. Maybe that would be a sub-hex feature. You go from a ruined village. I said like, oh, a ruined house might be a hex feature. It could be, but then depending on your world, maybe they're scattered all over the place, in which case having a ruined house might not be meaningful at all, in which case it's a sub-hex feature. To me, I think of the sub-hex features as the things that I would be fine with improvising in the moment or rolling dice in the moment. For example, the party's moving through the woods, and I'm just narrating it. I might not even roll dice. I have an idea of what kind of the woods look like in the area that I'm in. So I might talk about, okay, you see there's various little streams and rills and things like that, and little valleys in which these streams are flowing because there's a little bit of a hill, something like that. And I'll just throw that stuff out kind of narratively. Those things are all either collectively or individually sub-hex features. Little valleys, there's a little bit of a hill or part of terrain, or at least a sort of elevation changes. There's a little stream, all sub-hex features. I didn't need to roll on it. I just came up with it in my brain because that's just what was in my mind. But I would also feel comfortable in the moment using a table, maybe using the D30 sandbox companion or something else that has a list of a whole bunch of features. You can just roll on it quickly and say, okay, you run across, oh, look at that. It's a little stream. That would be fine. I would also look at sub-hex features as things that I consider sort of player-facing pursuits. The watering hole comes to mind. Unless we're in a desert or somewhere where water is special because it is in short supply, to me, finding a watering hole is less about what I'm presenting in the terrain, though of course it could come up on a random table, or like I just mentioned, I might just want to throw a pond or some kind of watering hole out there, and that's fine too. But these are things that I also put in front of the players is seek it out. Oh, this is something that, like, you're hunting, you're gathering resources. Water is a resource. You go gathering for it. Maybe you find one. I'm looking at it in terms of how can I do the least amount of work and get the most out of it. And for me, I don't feel like I need to pre-populate the world with a bunch of things, so I'm not going to do that. Or I'm going to wait until we get to that. Okay, now the party's in this hex and they're not traveling anymore. They've decided here's where we're camping and we're really exploring. Then we go into that kind of sub-hex exploration level, in which case, yeah, we may want to populate this now with, okay, we want stuff that's fixed on our maps. We're going to zoom in from that top level. We're going to go down and break that 1 6 mile hex up into a number of smaller hexes or squares, whatever you like. And now we do want to fill things up specifically on the map because I want to set those spatial relationships. And if they find a great campsite or they do find a watering hole and then it's over here and then this stuff's over here, now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I want to now spend some moments pre-populating it. But the ultimate thing here I want to try to convey with this video is figure out in your mind for your game, for your DMing style, for the way you like to run your games, what is important enough. And I say important, but I mean, it could just be interesting, intriguing, special. There's a whole lot of words for it because it could be anything from something that is important because it represents some lore or world building, right? The Tower of Amansul, which isn't just a place to spend the night, but it has all kinds of significance. That would be a landmark kind of spot. That's another way to think of it. So these hex features as sort of landmarks. Or it could be interesting from maybe you have a plot line that's running through where a certain cult is operating and they recently killed this hunter, and here is the hunter's shed that they burned down. So the player's finding that is meaningful, or it's just interesting for other reasons. But whatever that is for your game, figure out the types of things that fit that bill for you and your game. And those are the kinds of things I think I would want on my 6 mile hex map, so I can look at a glance and say, okay, these things are all here. Here's what they mean. And then for myself and for yourself, figure out the stuff that you're fine with populating later on, either as they come up, either just riffing as you're kind of in the moment in your game, or just doing on an ad hoc basis as the need arises. That stuff that you feel like, you know what, I can do this in the moment. Not that big a deal. It's not something I feel like I need to be pre-prepped in my mind about. Then relegate those to those sub-hex features that you can fill in later. If you're sweeping through your hex map, and as I talked about in another video, you might be layering it, going through and putting one feature down, then coming back and maybe putting a secondary feature down. Then if you get to that secondary, tertiary, whatever layer, and you want to add those in, fine. Otherwise, you could just riff on them as they come up or roll them up in the moment. And you can make those lists. And then you can decide, okay, I know the things that I want to point out. These are important. And then you can decide whether you want to have one of those important things kind of in every hex or in once per region. If you're kind of, I like to block hexes together in regions, so I might look at regions that way. And those are your hex features. Those are the ones you're going to want to make sure you have noted down because they're important in different ways to you. And the other stuff, put it aside, put it in some random tables, use things like the D30 Sandbox Companion and other kind of random tables, of which there are billions out there in the internet, for helping you when you need some inspiration for in-the-moment narration, or you find now that you need to drill down at that sub-hex level and populate them. I hope that makes sense. Might have been a bit of a ramble. I apologize for that. Let me know in the comments or elsewhere if this made sense to you, if you have more questions, if we want to delve more into defining features. I think there's kind of a lot we could talk about there, and I think it's something because the terms themselves tend to be kind of nebulous, and I don't think I helped with that, frankly, that it throws a lot of people off or it can add a lot of confusion. Let me know. Hope you appreciated this. Other than that, game on, and I'll talk to you later.